Hey friends, welcome to Huge Head Studio. My name is Robbie, and it is officially the holiday season. Here's a Hershey Kiss to prove it. Today we're making an elf on the shelf, but he's transitioning into Krampus, which is totally normal. Now you may ask, Robbie, why the hell would you do that? Well, I'll tell you. I was sitting in my living room the other day, staring back at my kid's elf as he endlessly and creepily stared at me, and I started to wonder, what would actually happen if he touched the little guy? Well, of course, we're told he allegedly loses his magic and all that blah blah, but I wondered, what if it showed a more visual effect from being touched? I figured the end results could be pretty cool, so I decided I might as well sculpt it. So my initial idea was to more or less make a zombie elf that showed signs of infection spreading from the point where he was touched, but that seemed a little dull. So I kept brainstorming, but then I thought, what if it was more like a gremlin situation? What if they tell the kids that elf will lose his magic because it's the safest explanation and it won't scare them, but what actually happens is something much worse? What if touching the elf turns him into Krampus? Alright, I get it. I know, it's weird and I'm weird, but let's do it anyway and have some fun. So while I was blabbering, I went ahead and built an armature for the body and the head and then added some aluminum foil to bulk out the head. That way it stays lightweight and I don't have to use a ton of clay, which helps because Sculpey is expensive, and shockingly, the art life isn't exactly a yacht purchasing career path. Let's just say that my wife married me for my... I don't know. I'm sure she had a reason at some point. Anyway, before we can make the elf transition into Krampus, I've got to make him actually look like a classic elf on the shelf. Although, along the way, I somehow managed to sculpt everything except an elf. We cycled through Sonic, Astro Boy, even Betty Boop. The journey is chaotic. But it does give us the chance to pull out the classic artist excuse, trust the process, which, let's be honest, it's really just something we whisper to ourselves to stay sane and avoid rage quitting and taking up a new hobby like gaming or bird watching. But eventually I push the clay around enough to find the face I'm looking for as he finally starts to resemble a little seasonal squatter that breaks into my house and makes himself feel at home every December. Once the face looks right, I need to make it smooth, like toy level smooth. So I brush on a bit of isopropyl alcohol, which slightly softens the surface of the clay without fully melting it due to scientific reasons I won't pretend to understand. But I do know it helps smooth out the surface and hide tiny little imperfections. And then once we get it smooth enough, it's time to roughen it back up a bit and start bringing out Krampus. I do this by giving him an angrier, mischievous little brow and then adding a fair amount of wrinkles. I still want to keep some of that plastic toy look on the wrinkled side though, so even though he's turning into Krampus, he's still got a hint of elf on the shelf in him. We're also going to give him a nice, weird, long, mildly unsettling Krampus tongue. First, I have to open the mouth just enough to give it a place to sit, and then after that I cut out a tongue-shaped strip and apply a bit of texture to make it believable. Then I give it a twist just to add to the creepy and attach it to the mouth with some bacon bun. I brush on some alcohol to soften the texture and then throw it in the oven to bake. While the head is baking, we're ready to move on to the body. I don't have any major plans for the body other than to make it look like the original fabric elf body, which I thought would be a decent enough challenge for me, as aside from the Beast of Black Friday, my experience with sculpting fabric is nearly in the negative. I tried a handful of tools to find a texture that would at least hint at fabric, but of all things, bunched up aluminum foil gave the best results. Who'da thunk it? So after molding the top half into a decent enough body shape, I grabbed some foil scraps and went to town roughing up the surface to push the fabric-like texture. With the top done, I went ahead and threw it into bake so I didn't have to worry about messing up the top half while working on the bottom half. After baking though, I found the bottom of the arms had some air bubbles that went undetected during sculpting and they felt a little brittle. So I broke out my Temu saw blade and chopped them off so I could redo them later. The body is relying on the hands for balance and I didn't want to leave the imperfections and have them chip or crack over time. After that, I slapped some clay onto the legs and did my best to make them look like elf legs, but I came to the realization that mostly smooth figures are much harder to make look convincing than wrinkled ones, whether skin or fabric. With wrinkles, the surface is broken up, so mistakes are easier to hide. Here, the simple open surfaces, there's nowhere to hide. But I was looking for a challenge, so whether we conquered it or not, at least we gave it a shot and learned something. In this case, we learned it sucks, and I suck at it, so moving forward, we'll avoid it whenever possible. Next up is the rough collar, which is what Google says this thing is called. I cut a circle out of clay using a cup and then hacked away at it to achieve all those pointed edges. Then I pushed the weird elf bling collar thing onto the body and rough it up where Krampus is starting to take over. While the body is back in the oven, the head is cooled and hard and begging for a Krampus-style horn. To do this, I roll out a strip of clay to a point and then press a tool into the horn as I roll it to create a groove that spirals its way to the tip. Then I cut off the edge so it can fit flush to the side of the head. Add a curl to the horn and then pop it in the oven to harden. Once done, I drill a hole into the head and then shove the armature wire that I added to the horn into the hole to give us a nice solid Krampus goat horn thing. Next, we're ready to add the hair, which kinda gives off the plastic version of a classic frat boy, do you know who my daddy is type of haircut. I'm not adding much texture to this one, as like the face, it's supposed to look like smooth toy plastic, so I do my best to roll it all nice and smooth so it resembles the elf as much as possible, you know, aside from the horn sticking out of it. Next, I add the ears, a simple rounded ear on the elf side, and then a pointy Krampus ear on the other side. So, aren't elves supposed to have pointy ears? This guy sits on a throne of lies. Anyway, all that's left to sculpt is the hat, so to save weight and Sculpey, I mash a bit of foil into a cone shape before wrapping it in a thin sheet of clay. After that, it's just a series of adding and smoothing strips here and there to fill out the shape until it looks like a pointy, clean elf hat. I add some minimal wrinkles where it's sitting on top of the horn to hopefully add to the believability before I take our fancy-dancy little ball of foil and roll it all over the hat to give it the same fabric-ish look as the body. We toss that in the oven to bake and then get started on paint with a simple white base coat. We follow that up by adding a peachy skin tone to the elf's face, which is totally not the right color and will have to be painted over shortly. Next, we cover the hat and the body with like 12 coats of an aggressively bright and festive red. After that, we skip the airbrush and just hand brush on a new skin tone that better matches the elf that's currently invading my home. Once that's done, we're ready for the eyes. And I'm going for the classic blue in the elf eye and an orangey red in the Krampus eye. So one eye is ready to celebrate the good boys and girls while the other is here to terrorize those on the naughty list. Next, I add a wash to the Krampus side so the color flows into all the recessed areas, then wipe away most of the surface paint to make the folds and wrinkles really pop. I tried a few different brownish shades at first, but in the end, a cooler blue-gray seemed to work better for the icy, sinister look I was going for. Now that the left side of the face is nice and Krampusy, I add a simple brown coat to the hair and then start adding dark, dirty washes to the horn and all the fabric on the Krampus side. The dark washes are meant to make the Krampus side feel a little grimy and less than jolly, like he's been out in the cold punishing misbehaving kids instead of being a shiny, perfect toy. Dabbing away the excess instead of wiping it lets the paint settle into all the cracks, highlighting every wrinkle and fold like I did with the face while leaving a stained and dirty look on the surface. After that, I apply a red base coat to the tongue before following up with some pink highlights. Then I make a minor mistake by using a coat of UV resin in the eyes, which ended up being way too glossy. A lighter coat of less glossy varnish may have been better, but what's art without mistakes? And with that, we're finally ready to assemble this little guy. An elf on the shelf that was touched by a naughty little child, and now like a mogwai that was fed after midnight, he's transforming into a mischievous little creature. But instead of a gremlin, he's Krampus. Well, I hope you enjoyed this little peek into the weird junk that bounces around in my head. If you're into weird stuff like this, there's plenty more where that came from, so make sure you subscribe to the channel to keep up with the nonsense. But I reckon that's all for now, so kids, don't touch your elves, and I'll see you on the next one. Thanks for watching.